And we're back. Perfect way to spend a Monday evening. You know, the next best thing to recording yourself doing these videos is listening to them. So we're on the journey together. But tonight, I wanted to talk about power pivot. So, power pivot, from my experience, a lot less people seem to know about power pivot than they do about power query. And that's just my own personal anecdote. But it's really a precursor to Power BI. So sure, you could 100% get to a point where, if you're just getting into analytics now, in my opinion, you could probably skip Power Pivot and just get right into Power BI. In fact, the same skills that you would use to bring data into Power BI are the same skills that you would use in Power Query. So I'd say there's definite value in learning Power Query. You're ultimately going to have to use it when you bring data into Power BI. But Power Pivot is kind of like an older version of Power BI. And it's got the same functionality. It uses the same DAX programming or analytical language. But in my opinion, the real reason why I would learn Power Pivot, the real value, is that unless you're going to publish Power BI reports, a lot less people, in my experience, seem to have access to Power BI. So for instance, if you create a Power BI file and it's just on your organization's network, it's within a folder somewhere in the network. It's just there's a bit of a learning curve there for people to just even open the file. And so unless you're going to go ahead and publish an interactive BI report, which 100% is kind of the way to do it, I find like sharing files and doing quick analyses, putting together pivot tables, pivot charts, that's where Excel Power Pivot still has value. It's like the lingua franca of analytics. So definitely I would say, you're not wasting your time if you're learning Power Pivot if you intend to learn Power BI. So that's my that's my improvised advocation for learning this piece of software. But without further ado, let's get into it. So I will timestamp this so you don't have to listen to the full preamble if you don't want to. Anyway, so you've got a few tables here. Let's presume that we've queried them all in. Okay, so you've got a budget table, got a tiny little budget. Let's say this is in millions of dollars. And you've got third-party purchase orders. Let's just pretend we don't have this. So we've got third-party purchase order values. We've got labor and equipment. Say this is our own labor and equipment. It's our staff. It's our employees. And then you've got transactions, right? So this is the committed value or the tentatively committed value. And these are the actual all-in costs. Now, let's say you want to, you got a few different tables here, but you ultimately want, let's say we're doing a little cost report. We want to sum everything against our cost categories, right? Say this is our work breakdown structure, or in the case of project management, you got work breakdown, you got cost breakdown structure. So let's say that we need to report out all of our labor and equipment costs and our third-party costs, and ultimately our third-party committed value against these cost categories, right? This is what our client needs to see. Let's say this is even what our internal executive management needs to see. So how do you do this? Well, you can do sum ifs. You can just sum ifs everything against this little table, 100%. And then you could throw, from that created table, you could create, select your range and you could create a pivot table. But when you're working with hundreds of thousands of lines of data, it's maybe not, it's not going to be as quick to do everything within this tabular interface, right? And if you need to scale the analyses associated with your file, it's just faster and more constrained and more structured in a way to do it in Power Pivot. Okay, so here's what you do. So let's see, you got these tables. You want to drop it into a Power Pivot where ultimately I could create a pivot table or a pivot chart from a combined version of these tables, or a combination, a fragmented combination thereof. So first, you got to make sure that you have access to the ribbon. And this always happens when I'm recording. So let's do it like this. Okay, so how do you get access to this ribbon? Well, if you don't see Power Pivot on your Excel file, you're going to go into File, drop down to Options, and you see all these little icons here on the left. You're going to go to Add-ins. And you're going to see a list of things like this. Okay, so you've got active application add-ins and then inactive. Now, we want Power Pivot. So you can see mine is active. But you go over here to the type, COM add-in. Okay, so manage add-ins at the bottom. You can see here you've got Excel, COM, Actions, etc. Go to COM add-ins, right? Depending on what it says here. Go to Go, and then you really just toggle it on. Make sure it's toggled. Check. Boom. Okay, and it should pop up. So once you see it, right, you're going to click on Power Pivot, and you've got a few options here: Manage, Measures, KPIs. We're going to add this to Model. Okay, so you can see here, this looks like a table, right? It has to be a table. You have to format it as a table. And I'll show you how to do that in a second if you don't know. But let's add it to Data Model. Here we go. Getting into it now. Boom. There it is. Okay, and what do we have it called? Let's see. Oh, it's called Table 3. How intuitive. All right, let's flip it to Budget. Okay. See, it's clunkier than BI. Always shakes when you load. Third parties, we're going to do the same thing. Boom. Add to model. And we're going to call this, we still have a weird table 2. Let's call this purchase order value. Okay, and labor and equipment. It's not letting me. Okay, labor and equipment. Oh, what do we do now? Boom. Look at us go. Right, so we're adding all these different tables into this interface. Oh, now we're on a roll. Let's click down here. And we'll do the last one. This is actually the query that we brought into the last video, if you saw that, for the Power Query video. Add the data model. Boom. Current transactions. Now, why did it do that? Because table's called that. Okay, so now here we are. And, we've got these different tables, but it kind of just looks like a different version of where we just were. So how did we progress? Well, you've got these icons here at the top. Data view, diagram view, calculation area. Well, we're going to go to diagram view. Watch this. Oh, we're in it now. So again, this kind of functionality, this is the same thing that you would see in Power BI. Whenever you're doing a data model, and this is a concept that'll come to a more robust fruition in SQL, you've got to have ultimately a unique identifier. So when you're creating a table, you can't have duplicates, right? If you have duplicates of something, then it won't, there'll be ambiguity in the relationship that you're forming. So ultimately what we're going to try to do here is form a relationship. Once you form a relationship between your tables, then you're able to interact with those tables. Okay, so let's say, we've got this little kind of a beginning of a star here, and we've got cost category. So you're going to click, whatever that identifier is. In this case, we want to sum costs against the cost category. Click, move, connect. And you can see here this little asterisk. So this little star here, that means many. So one to many. And if you double click, just as I did here, then you can see what the connection is. You can see what the relationship is. Do the same thing over here. Boom, one to many. And this should do it here, cost code. Okay, one to many. Look at that. So now we have a data model. We've now connected all of our tables. And the nexus point of this connection is cost category. Okay, so once you have your diagram set up, you're going to pop back into data view. And again, there's different things you can do here. So let's say you wanted to go the other way and bring information. Let's say you had, the name here is cost category 1. Got cost category. Well, over here, we don't know what this cost category is called. So in the case of construction or project management, this cost category, it could have a unique name that, you like, oh, what's 7001? What's 7002? You might want to actually bring the name of that cost category into the file where you've got many of the identifier. So these are unique, right? You only see one example here of each cost category name and numeric value, or numeric identifier. In this case here, you have many, right? You can see duplicates. But there's a formula called related, which allows you to bring a piece of information associated with the unique identifier from the uniquely identifiable table. So I'm going to show it to you right now. So again, Excel really excels at its intuitiveness. You're going to type equals, and you can start doing your formula here. And now you got related, pops up. And as you've just started this, now you're officially working in DAX. Okay, this is the DAX language here. So related, and look what it's telling us here. It's giving us a few different examples of what you can bring in. And let's do this. Okay, so you see how it brought, now obviously it's the same thing, it brought it in. Well, we already have the cost category. We don't need the cost category. We need the cost breakdown. Look at that. So you can see what happens, right? You just literally, after related, it prompts you with the options that you can bring in. So basically what it's saying is, okay, we know that through the connection of the 7001, 7002, that column, we can now speak to the other table that is associated via that numeric identifier. And these are the options that we can bring in. And we want to bring in our cost breakdown. Voila. All right, and now you can name it something. You can, again, call it cost category. So perfect, right? So this is perfect for bringing in labels. If you've got a table that is more reduced in its categorization and you want to layer in other descriptors, again, like the cost category description. Let's say you had a connection to see purchase orders, and then in another table you've got the customer name associated with that purchase order. You want to bring that information in, right? You want to layer up the table. Then this is a way you can do it. And again, this is just adding columns, so we're going to leave it there. You can also do measures, but that'll be for another video. So, okay, related, bring the information in, and then once we do a pivot table, you can actually pull the information that we've brought into this table into your pivot table. Now we want to go the other way because we're doing a cost report, right? So you're going to go to budget. I want to say, geez, how are we going to bring in all the different cost data associated with labor and equipment? We got the committed value with third parties, and we've got the actual transactional value. How are we going to bring that in here? Well, kind of the same formula, similar formula. You're going to type in this under add column, you're going to type in equals, and we're just going to get right into it. Sum x, kind of like sum ifs, bracket, related. Boom, it prompts you, related table. And oh my goodness, look at this. Look at all the stuff that you can bring in. Well, let's just start, because we already got the budget data. Let's start with labor and equipment. Cost. Okay, that's the table we want to get to, but first we're going to layer in the table itself. Well, here, I'll just show you what happens if you do this. Let's do labor and equipment. Labor and equipment. Looks like it's going to error out on us. Okay. See, it didn't work. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we've now said sum x, a related table, and we're just going to name the table first. So just name the table first. Then comma, bracket, and now you're going to get into it again, and you're going to type in the cost. One bracket, enter. And there we go. So this is the DAX version of sum ifs. And with other formulas in DAX, you can like filter formula, you can do a kind of multiple criteria sum ifs, but that is for another video. I'm already long-winded enough. Okay, so let's call this equipment cost. You see where I'm going with this? We've got other information. Okay, boom, sum x, related. And what are we going to do now? Well, we've already got labor and equipment. Now let's bring in our procurement transactions. Remember, bracket, comma, procurement transactions, calling this one value, bracket, enter. We're moving now. Oh, didn't work. It's fussy. Why didn't you work? Let's see. Value. Transactions, procurement transactions, value, kill a bracket, enter. Show error, calculation required. We've got sum x. We've got procurement transactions. Laboring over. Calculate. And we got some blanks, right? Because again, in this case, we've got labor and equipment across 6 categories. We've only got procurement value across 3 categories. Let's call this procurement transactions. Oh, Power Pivot, long video. Okay, what's the other thing that we're going to do? Well, we've got sum x. See, a lot of it's rinse and repeat. Related table, what's the other one? Purchase order value. We want that committed value. Purchase order value. What is it? It's the value one, right? Remember, just one bracket. Boom. If it errors out, again, you toggle with it, you fight with it. It's gonna fight with me here. It's gonna fight with me. I just find Power BI more intuitive and less clunky. We're gonna get it though. Budget. We don't want that. Sum X. Related table. Boom. Everything looks good. Calculate. Now explain to me why that happened. Not sure, but nevertheless, we got it. Purchase order value. Okay. Now the last thing I'll do, because Jesus, it's already been 21 minutes. So now we've got our purchase order value, we've got our budget value, we've got our equipment costs, we've got our procurement transactions. Now we can create all kinds of different, uh, in this case, columns or measures. We'll just do columns. You can do the calculations here, and then they'll pop up in your pivot table, and we don't have to alter the original data sets that we've queried in, right? So we do it within the Power Pivot framework. So we want total cost. So let's take our equipment cost plus our procurement transactions, and enter. Beauty. See? It's basically added these two columns. And let's label it before we forget. Total cost. And let's just do our budget variance. Our budget variance. Okay, we're going to go budget less total. Budget less total cost. We're going to get there. Budget variance. Look at that. It's all calculated. Wow, we're way over. Way over. Okay, but look what we've done. We've created a pivot table within the Power Pivot framework, or a pre-pivot table. And in this case, we've just loaded in tables from our Excel spreadsheet into the framework so that we could basically combine the data across these different tables to then do something like this. Pivot table. Okay, let's do this. New worksheet. And look at this. It's like a super pivot table. Let's go with budget. Okay, so now, see this? We've got all of our different columns that we created. Committed value. We got our transactions. We can combine it all in one nice little table. And let's go like this. Cost category. Oh, and you know what else? What's that other table? Cost breakdown. And you know what? Let's actually just flip it. Oh, you pivot table. Field list. Okay, we'll just do a couple here. Flip this one to currency. Flip this one to currency. Okay, we're rolling now. And we want to go to design. Let's get rid of subtotals. Let's put it into tabular form. Okay, and look at that. So we've got from several disparate tables, we've been able to combine it all conveniently without all these sum ifs and X lookups within the tabular interface. We've done it in Power Pivot. And now it's just a tight table that we don't need to worry about it breaking or a formula getting mistyped or whatever the case may be. And the best part, whenever you refresh your queries, whenever new data enters here, you just go back into your Power Pivot framework and you hit refresh. And it kind of jitters and shakes on you. Here's the jitter, the Power Pivot jitter. Again, it's like if the 1990s had Power BI. That's what this feels like. Okay, but here we are again. Let's go back into here. So last thing I'll show you. So let's say we've got our summary tab here, and right from our Power Pivot framework, let's drop a chart in there. Existing worksheet. Look, sheet 2, J3, boom. And you can do the exact same thing. Right? So you got your breakdowns, you got your budget variance, you got your total cost, and you've got your budget. And look at that. And now whenever you refresh your Power Pivot, then all this stuff, it will feed, right? It will feed with the refresh. Right? You can play around with your charts here, stack them. And there you go. This is the beginning of dashboarding within Excel. Go into view. I don't like the grid lines. So look at that. And then once this part is automated, right, this is basically the analytical follow through, you can actually spend more time on inspecting the integrity of your raw data and making sure that what you're pulling in is as it should be. So that's the beginning of Power Pivot, and ultimately that's the beginning of Power BI. So I would say muck around in Power Pivot, get good enough with it so that you can throw together analyses that you can send to other people on your team who may not have Power BI. Power BI is maybe a little just complicated for them, or they're not familiar with it, but they're familiar with Excel. So that's kind of, as I've said before, it's a sketch pad. This is a sketch pad that you can pass around with your team very easily, and it still has a lot of the same robust functionality of Power BI. But again, this is like Power BI practice. So if you know how to use Power Query and you know how to use Power Pivot, then in my opinion, you're ready for Power BI. But it's just beyond the 29-minute mark. Oh my goodness, if you've stuck with me this long, then it's a beautiful thing. Analytics on a Monday. Thanks everyone for your time. Until next time.